Thank you for taking a moment to watch this episode of Translating Technobabble. Today I'm sitting down with Nitin, one of our senior enterprise software architects and a trusted advisor to many engineering managers in the enterprise.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to talk about this concept that a lot of what I would consider some of the real leaders in engineering management are moving towards, and it's this concept of enablement. I'd like to at least start translating this term. Like, what is enablement?
When we talk about enablement, we really talk about it in two contexts. We can either talk about enabling your development team and helping them perform better, deliver features much faster, know what they're doing deeply. We can also talk about enablement in terms of your organization and how can we make your organization perform much better. So if you're releasing once a year or once a quarter and you're having difficulties there, if your developers are experiencing frustration with their code not getting merged in quickly enough, all of these types of things add up. And so you can do things with your organization to help your development teams perform better. And so these are the two types of enablement initiatives that you might want to undertake.
How is this different than what I'm used to? Let's use the term staff augmentation or siloed kind of development where you bring an expert in to help with bandwidth. How is this different?
Right. Whenever we think of working with an external partner, we might be concerned that once the solution is implemented, your development team might not know how to work with the solution, and they didn't have any participation in the implementation. And so a good engagement would be one where they're working very closely with your developers so that there isn't this handoff process at the end. And one of the other things that you might be concerned about is whether it really is bringing much value to your development team. So for example, you might bring in external partners, but they work as part of your development team working on features, and they don't have the opportunity to pass on some of the knowledge that they might have and all the expertise that they bring to the table. And your development team misses out on that opportunity to learn because they're just busy cranking out features. They don't have this experience. And so those are the two types of things where it really doesn't add much value. It's not enabling your team to be at their full potential.
So if it's not just adding expertise to the team, in the sense that we know about staff augmentation or a specific sprint where you're adding somebody, what does this look like then if it's an enablement partnership?
Mm-hmm. The partner really works with your development teams and your organization in one of two ways. One, they can help you undertake large initiatives where you might not have the expertise in-house or you might not have availability. All of your resources are tied up doing other things. The partner can help you achieve these large initiatives. If you're wanting to upgrade Angular to the latest version, or you're trying to move into a monorepo, you're trying to achieve a better CI/CD pipeline. These are things that you can bring in the expertise of the partner, and they can help you achieve these large initiatives where it might take you a very long time to do it internally, just depending on resourcing and timing. The other thing they can do is offer to enrich your developers. They can help them with workshops. They can do one-on-one pairing while they're building their features so that your developers can learn from their expertise. And this is more tailored for them. It's not the case that they just announce the best practices and expect you to adopt them. This interaction takes into account all of the constraints in your organization, takes into account your domain, because the industry best practice might not be the same thing that your developers might have the opportunity to work with. Right?
So you're getting the expertise you need, while at the same time, your team's leveling up. Okay.
And that's really what we're going for, yeah.
Got it. Okay. So if I'm an engineering manager and I'm out there listening, what do I need to know before I engage in something like this?
Right. Because your first thought might be, why don't I just hire the right person internally and have them do this type of activity? And one of the things we've seen is you can definitely do it internally, but it's tricky because you have to hire the right resource who's both technically able to implement the best solution, but they're also able to coach and do one-on-one pairings with the developers. And we find that it's always a problem because that resource might then be used for building other features or working on other initiatives. And so there isn't that much time available for them to be able to coach your development team. And so it might be the case that you might do it once a week or once a month. And what we're really saying is if you bring in a partner and that's their sole focus, you get a lot more out of it because your developers are exposed to that constantly as opposed to just once a week.
Another thing that I've noticed in a lot of the enterprise when engineering managers want to handle this internally is there's this internal scenario where developers who thought they should be slated for training and be the one that's chosen to help mentor the rest of the team, they need to go back and get more education, more best practices, get up to current standards so that they can then teach. What we run into often is that it creates some internal conflicts amongst the team because who's to say that that person's the one that was supposed to be chosen to help mentor the rest of the team? Bring an external resource on board who's a trusted guide, and now there's no internal conflicts. There's no politics involved. It's just somebody there to help them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to head down this concept of enablement. Like, what do I need to know?
There are some things you can do internally to help ensure a successful long-term engagement with your partner. And one of the main things that we want to do is to identify some specific goals that we want to achieve. The goals might take the form of specific initiatives that we want to work on, specific teams that we want to trial the partnership with, how we roll out those things. Without having a specific goal in mind, it's easy for the engagement to not achieve the results in a timely fashion. You have to have some guidance on what you're specifically working towards each step of the way. One of the other things you might want to evaluate is do a survey with your developers on the specific topics that you're trying to achieve and see how comfortable they are working with these things and see if they feel like they need external help or they're not able to find the resources on their own. What is the baseline for the engagement? And so it's important to do this so that later on you're able to find out how well we achieve these goals. And so the best time to do it is before the engagement starts. Send out a survey to all of your developers, make sure that they all fill it out honestly, and then make sure that they're available. And a lot of the times what we encounter is because the development teams are striving towards achieving a goal within a set timeline, they don't have the time required to pair with the external partner. And so they don't have that opportunity of learning. And so if they're just building features, they might miss out on finding the best way to build that feature, or even a way to build that feature that doesn't lead to problems later on. There are two other things that are important. One is your development team actually has to want the help. And we talked about it earlier where there's some competition amongst the development teams, but sometimes there's resistance also to outside help. And so it's important as part of that survey to also ask your developers how comfortable they are receiving outside help, whether they want to be involved in evaluating them. And lastly, you want to have one dedicated person whose sole focus is this engagement. Otherwise, the focus is on the partner or the development team, and sometimes it's just not possible for them to take care of it themselves. They need someone there whose focus is to bridge that gap.
Got it. Those are the key things that I need to be thinking about before I engage. So then what?
Now we're looking to which partner we're going to use. And some criteria you can use to evaluate whether or not a partnership is going to be fruitful. It's hard to say ahead of time, but some things you can look out for are how does that partner handle mentorship internally? Because it's a constant learning process. If they have a focus on mentorship within their own organization, if they're active in the community, if they organize conferences, they have a focus on learning. And this is very important for these types of engagement because you want them to cohesively interact with your team and make sure that there is that knowledge transfer happening constantly, right? And you also want to look to see if they've engaged with clients your size before. If they have expertise with clients your size, then you know that they've encountered some of these issues before. They know what works and what doesn't work. And you also want to make sure that they have the specific expertise that you need.
What does an engagement look like?
There is a chart that became famous because of the unknown unknowns, where you don't really know the things you don't know, right? And you can think of the engagement as trying to find things that you're already doing well. The partners can help highlight the things you're already doing well that you don't need to change, that you should keep doing. They can highlight things that you think you're doing well, but it's not according to best practices, or there are some red flags that have come up from other organizations that they might be able to say, listen, if you continue to do it this way, these are the types of things that you might run into. Here are things you can do to mitigate that or change it. But there's the biggest thing is the things you don't know, and you don't even know that you don't know these things. And the partner does know what might make sense for your organization, and they're able to provide these recommendations to you.
So that's helpful in terms of how the partner can help specifically and what to expect as I'm thinking about bringing on a partner. What does an initiative look like specifically?
One of the best things that works is to have a short, focused effort where we have a resource assigned to a particular team or a particular effort. And once that is completely finished, then that resource from the partner can move on to another team. You can also do it in conjunction. So you can have multiple resources from the same partner work on different initiatives at the same time. But what we really want to see is a sequence of different initiatives taken up in the organization that are very focused and achievable in that time. And so in one quarter, we can have one resource doing workshops, another resource doing a CI/CD pipeline for you. And in another quarter, the first resource who was previously doing workshops can now work more one-on-one with these teams. And you can pick maybe one team or two teams that they can work with. And the resource who were previously doing CI/CD can now move into another larger initiative like an Angular upgrade. And this can happen in tandem again. And so what we really want is in different quarters, we've identified certain milestones that we want to achieve with these resources.
Got it. So we're not losing any domain knowledge. The team's getting leveled up, and we're getting tremendous bandwidth of execution, expert execution, right?
Right.
Now that I have a partner that I've invested in, what are some best practices for how to help the partner become kind of a cohesive part of my team?
Mm-hmm. One of the most important things we can do is to set some expectations around what that partner is able to provide us. One of the biggest expectations is one of time. And we want to make sure that the partner is available when our team needs them. We also have to make sure that the partner knows when the team needs them. And so what you can do is set specific times of the day where they can both meet and speak to each other, which you can do at a stand-up, but also to identify times of the day when that partner is reserved for your team. And so your team knows that, okay, I have this issue. I know that the partner is available at 2 o'clock. I can reach out to them at other time windows. It's not a problem. If the timing works out, we can have a conversation. They might be helping other people, so they might not be available right away. But I know that between this time window, that partner is available to help me.
Having that predictable time.
That's right.
Yep. That everybody can count on and everybody knows we can get together. Even if we don't use it, it's a fixed time that everybody knows that you need to be available. Got it.
And that solves a lot of issues around availability and not knowing when to reach out. And it also reduces one of the barriers because we want to make this process as soon as possible. If someone wants to reach out for help, all the things that get in the way of that would reduce my likelihood of reaching out for help. And so we can completely eliminate that by saying, during this time, we're definitely available. The other thing we want to set an expectation around is one of trust. And we're bringing in a subject matter expert in some areas. We want to be able to trust them to know what to do. And a lot of the times we might bring in an external partner, but might not provide them the resources in order to make it the most successful it can be. So, for example, they need to understand our customer, they need to understand our processes, our domain. We should make sure that the partner knows all of this information so they can provide the right recommendation to us. And when they provide the recommendation, we can trust their recommendation is right for us.
Yeah, we see that a lot when the team, a partner's brought in for expertise, and some of that homework you talked about up front hasn't been completed. Mm-hmm. You end up in a situation where they're pushing back all the time on the guide who has done this many times successfully.
Right.
Because a lot of that homework isn't done. And it's funny because this is what you're touching on right now. We get to see quite often if the homework's not done up front from the engineering manager.
Right.
If an engagement goes well, right, we should have certain things that were achieved, goals that we set out. Our team should be in a different place. How do we know? How do we know there's a success in this enablement model?
Mm-hmm. Well, success we can determine in a couple of ways, right? And if we're talking about the large-scale initiative, then that's a much easier one because we can see whether the initiative was a success or not. If we were trying to make our CI/CD pipeline much faster, it's more quantifiable. We know that the time is much shorter, that our PRs can get in much quicker, we can deploy much faster. Those are easier to identify. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about leveling up the developers, it's a little bit trickier. And so that's why taking that baseline survey at the start of each phase is a great idea, because at the end of the phase, you give the developers the same survey again and see what their answers are and see if they're now more comfortable in these subject areas because they've received the knowledge from the subject matter expert, the partner. And you can then determine across the board whether or not the developers feel like they're better off. One of the other things you might want to look for to see if it was a success is if there's documentation there, there's automation if required, your developers say that they know, they understand what the implementation was that they just did. Because if it was fully implemented by the partner, your development team doesn't know what's happening or how to work with it, then they'll let you know. And so this is another factor that you can think of as a success is, okay, we built this thing, but can our developers work with it in future?
If I'm an engineering manager, is this something that I'm proactively planning in advance, right? Kind of this retro, if you will?
Yes. Ideally, it would be when just before the end of each focused effort. So for example, if we're doing it quarterly, then just before the end of the quarter so that both the partner and the developers are both still interacting with each other. And then there can be some learning experiences and some knowledge transfer over the feedback for that quarter.
Yeah, as we've done those retros, even together, it's been really insightful to watch in our engagements how we're able to help then the engineering leadership plan the next phase, because they're using not only what we've done, but now getting some outside perspective on what should be done next. And to your point around making time for these retros to see the business impact that's been made of these enablement exercises, but also then putting expert resources on helping plan the future. I've watched those be tremendously successful. So we've talked about what enablement is. We've provided some insight about like what it's not and some of the traditional models. Talked about some of the benefits of getting a cohesive extension of your team of bandwidth, but also mentorship to help elevate the team's expertise, bring them up to speed with modern practices. You've shared some perspective on what specifically an engineering manager should be thinking about as they hire and bring on a partner, which is a tremendous investment. A lot of opportunity costs can be wasted if they get it wrong. The things to look out for when hiring one. What I can expect as a manager to not only very specifically expect, and some of those things that I might not even be thinking about, the kind of value that they're going to bring, the unknowns, as you mentioned. and then maybe how the team should be thinking about a trusted guide in the team and how they should interact, how to prepare for these engagements. And then lastly, you kind of recap with like, how do we measure the business impact and how to schedule those retros, what to be looking for in those retros. So Nitin, I just want to thank you for sitting down and sharing your knowledge and working with many enterprises around this concept of enablement. It seems like kind of the more modern concept of bringing in external resources to help engineering teams. And I hope that you, listening, got some value from this. If we can be of help in any way, please reach out to us. You can go to briebug.com and schedule a discovery call. We'd love an opportunity to talk with you. Or if you have other questions that we can have Nitin or anybody else on the team answer for you, we're here to help. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.